Many of you have probably owned one of those cheap $2 foam glider planes. They actually fly quite well when thrown by hand. But what if we tried adding motors to it and made it fly not just down, but up, controlling it with a remote? You're about to find that out, and moreover, you will be even able to replicate the whole thing at home. Due to frequent use, our previous cardboard version of the plane had almost completely fallen apart, so it served as the parts donor for the new, much cooler version of the aircraft. The old one weighed about 180 grams, but thanks to the plastic construction of the new plane and its starting weight of just 45 grams, I expected to get much higher flight speed and longer battery life from a single charge. Wait a second, there are two metal balls in the cockpit, and without them, the weight dropped to an astonishingly low 29 grams. Perfect. First, we needed to take the plane apart. Next, using a utility knife, we had to completely clean out the plastic from the cockpit and make it as spacious as possible for the control board and all the necessary components to fit inside, thus being protected from the moisture and damage. We had to do the same with the cockpit canopy because it was very thick. Few minutes later, everything was ready and the microcontroller board fit into place without a problem. The next step was the preparation of a place to mount the motor. The easiest way to do this was by trimming a small piece of the nose of the plane using a utility knife. Additionally, I cut grooves that match the shape of the motor mount and the wires coming from it. A hot soldering iron melts foam like a knife through butter. Now everything fits perfectly. I decided not to attach the motor rigidly with glue or nails, but to mount it on a flexible suspension. For this, I attach these rubber bands to the motor's mounting tabs in a specific way. Also, I pushed a regular wooden stick through the cockpit and trimmed the ends, leaving small portions sticking out. As you can see, I easily hooked the rubber bands from the motor onto the stick. This way, in the case of a crash, the propeller and the motor won't break. They'll simply detach from their mount and I can easily put them back in their place. To make the plane capable of turning, I needed to add movable ailerons to the wings, so using a metal rubber and a utility knife, I cut out such large sections from each wing. Then I trimmed a small part of the edge at the 45-degree angle. You'll see why in a moment. Next, I take a piece of reinforced tape and reattached it to the aileron in its original place. The tape acts as a flexible hinge, allowing the aileron to move not only upward but also downward, all thanks to that small angled cut. I repeated the same steps off camera for the elevator on the tail of the plane. It was time to remove all the parts from our donor that we intended to use to upgrade our Chinese drone. Stefano looked at them and pointed out that we didn't have enough servos to control all four moving elements of the aircraft. I didn't quite understand what he meant at the time, and I just kept working. The first servo was installed behind the cockpit. I had to cut a recess, so the servo would stick out as little as possible to avoid disrupting the plane's aerodynamics. We made one slit on each aileron to insert the linkage mounts, that can either be store-bought or homemade from wooden sticks. Then I took some standard wire from a hardware store and bent it like this using pliers. One end was inserted into the servo horn, and the other into the mount on the aileron. Great, it works! But then I ran into the issue Stefan had mentioned. We only had one servo for the front section of the plane, but two ailerons to control. Luckily, each servo comes with a cross-shaped horn that can replace the regular arm. Thus, by attaching wires to both sides of the cross, we are able to control both wings using a single servo. Now, it was time to prepare the second mounting point at the tail of the plane. I secured the servo there using hot glue. Just like before, I attached the linkage mount with a fairly long piece of wire. but here the situation was a bit trickier. We couldn't use a cross-shaped horn this time, because we needed both elevator flaps to move together, not in the opposite direction. To solve this problem, I took a piece of wire and bent it as shown in the video. Then, using a candle, I heated another piece of wire and used it like a soldering iron to burn grooves in the foam, shaped precisely to fit our bent wire construction. Let's fix it in place with some hot glue. Just look at how smoothly it works. This simple but clever solution allowed us to rigidly link the two elevator flaps, so they can now be controlled by a single servo. At this point, we were ready to install the control board and other electronics inside the cockpit. It's crucial to position the battery correctly so that the plane's center of gravity is located just beneath the front wings. After cutting away part of the fuselage at the bottom, I placed the battery there. It will power the main motor and servos. The charging port was inserted into the recess in the body to prevent it from getting wet from the grass. I decided to secure the cockpit canopy using two small magnets, which sticks to a pair of screws embedded in the fuselage. It seems to hold quite well. Let's install the motor. Connect the power cables and mount an orange propeller using a rubber band, allowing it to bend back on impact instead of braking. The plane will be controlled using this remote controller from AliExpress. After a few configuration tweaks, I tested the servos. Everything seems to be working perfectly. Let's start the motor. Its power should be more than enough for our aircraft. The final weight was just 114 grams. But I was concerned that the wing area had been reduced by more than a half compared to the previous model. Whether everything would actually work could only be determined through a real outdoor test. Launch and... At first, I wasn't doing very well, and the plane crashed almost immediately. Thanks to the flexible engine and propelled mount, they weren't damaged and could easily be reattached. The plane was flying extremely fast and I couldn't keep up with how quickly it changed direction. But after a while, I managed to keep it in the air for a fairly long time. You might think I'm an excellent pilot, casually pulling off such complex maneuvers, but believe me, none of this was intentional. At that point, I was simply doing my best to keep the plane from crashing or flying out of sight. Turns out, that's enough to make the flight look impressive. We brought a power bank to the field so we could recharge the plane when its battery ran low. And so, we spent the whole evening enjoying the results of our work, turning a hopeless little foam glider into a cool, radio-controlled aircraft capable of performing advanced aerobatics tricks with ease. By the end of the day, after many crashes, the plane looked a bit battered. But none of its critical components were damaged and it was still ready for another mission.